taken unilaterally. And I will give a fair definition of consultation later on. How can opposition, parliamentary, extra-parliamentary, NGO, enter into wide discussion with a regime which thrives on hostility and bad blood? The bill is being introduced by a hard-up, desperate regime trying to obtain some political mileage. There is no salvation, the doomsday scenario inscribed for the regime. And this is not history in the making, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. It is a mockery of history. The bill is being moved on the threshold of dissolution of Parliament. La montagne aura couché d'une souris. It's almost a copycat of the July 2019 legislation. But we on this side of the House, as a responsible opposition, want to regulate preventively and not accidentally. The regime is like a car crash waiting for a war. Let us look at the meaning of wide consultation. The legislation should have been the subject of wide consultation at the bar of public opinion. Consultation with honesty and sincerity of purpose with all stakeholders, accompanied by all stakeholders, paying heed to what they have to say, and make patience a virtue. And it can be done. And it can be done within the reasonable time, but not on the threshold of dissolution of Parliament. As I've stated earlier, the government deliberately wants the bill to suffer natural death. I hope the government will act positively to the proposal made by Honorable Ganu when he intervened on the bill in 2019. And I quote, "Madam, I have with me a copy of a PQ dated the 15th of September 2015, which reads, does the Right Honorable Prime Minister think this is a fit case where a select committee should be set up with a defined frame presided by Attorney General or some other minister to allow all political parties in the House or outside to come and depose? This is a subject, and I quote him, which interests all political parties, of course, the society at large, but a select committee with a definite time frame under the chairmanship of a minister should be set up to hear evidence about what type of law do we need for the financing of political parties and what is best suited for Mauritius. And the Prime Minister then, on the 15th September 2015, was Saneru Jagannath. And he replied, well, we will give into consideration, and if need be, we will have recourse to it. The debate rests also on the funding and incentive structure to provide funding to enhance women participation. No woman should be left out. There is unanimity for fair representation of female candidates at the general election. Not less than 1/3 of women to stand as candidates. What is now a reality at municipal and village council election should be equally right for general election. But what is happening currently now on the threshold of dissolution of Parliament? Who's influencing peddling day in and out? Even police officers in station have been coerced to use promotional pen with MSM logo. And the Prime Minister dares to talk of level playing field. The MSM is the last to want to disclose, disclosure of its war chest. It's thrive on opacity and in a cesspool of corruption. The leader of the House shapes the agenda. The political arm of the executive is yet again moving a stillbirth legislation on financing of political parties. An act of desperation from a politically bankrupt regime. Money politics, fake news, fake AI-generated video will not help them. The dice is cast. They know it's a winter of discontent. And on the 12th September 2019, who was more militant and vocal to condemn this legislation as a stillbirth? Who, like a fiddle on the roof, blurted out it was wrong to move the bill on the threshold of general election. Cela crée des soupçons de dessein politique, d'hypersensibilité et de tentative de démagogie. Who has unashamedly made a big U-turn, the Deputy Prime Minister, and sheer hypocrisy. Today, the statement of the DPM on financing of political parties are nothing but a soap opera. This is hypocrisy at its crescendo. And he wants to put us before our responsibility, which we are assuming, but from which he has run away. Mr. Speaker, let us look at Section 9, prohibited political donation, Section 10, suspicious donation of the bill. Compelling indeed. The clauses enable us to walk down the lane to recall the dirty deeds of the MSM. There is still a conspiracy of silence over the war chest of the MSM. If there is sincerity of purpose, I've stated in my opening speech. If there is honesty of purpose, Prime Minister, as mover of the bill, should set the right example, disclose, Mr. Speaker. Of course, transparency or accountability has never been the mantra of this regime. Say loud and clear, Mr. Prime Minister, that there's no proceeds of crime in the war chest, that there's no drug money, but who expects Financial Crime Commission to investigate? Certainly not the political arm of the executive. It is not the Attorney General who will say otherwise, irrespective whether he's in the chassis or in the office, sooner than expected, not in power. Mr. Speaker, the then Prime Minister and leader of MSM in mid-90s said in the House, in this very House, he unknowingly took drugs money donated by well-known drug trafficker. Prime Minister claimed he never received the 10 million from the self-proclaimed advisor, Mr. GMLS. Of course, the latter donated more in cash and kind.
Speaker, on a point of order, the honourable member is making an allegation that I have received money from Mr. So-and-so. He has to prove what he's saying. Otherwise, I can also say a lot of nonsense about him also. So, I move that he withdraws what he has said, unless he can substantiate in this House what he's saying.
Honourable Member, Leader of the Opposition, you're going too far. You started well. You're going too far, and you will not be able, I think, to substantiate whatever you're saying. So you better withdraw this allegation and apologize and continue your speech.
If you want me to withdraw, I'm simply echoing what the Honourable Gentleman has stated. If I can call him Honourable.
No,
okay.
Listen, don't take my time. No, either you withdraw or you withdraw from the House.
There's no need to fret. You want me to withdraw?
I don't want any explanation.
Okay, I withdraw.
The chair only rules.
To please the chair, I withdraw.
No, not to please me, but the House.
All right. Mr. Speaker.
There are rules and regulations in the House.
Okay, I bow to your rules and regulations.
Thank you, sir.
Now, I'm going to quote what political analysts have stated. And then political analysts have openly stated that the regime has more than 4 billion rupees to give away. And there are those who will take or send them packing. Now, what is the provision in the bill? A recurrent fine of 5 million as stipulated in the bill is chicken feed if ever the MSM and its appendages were to be sanctioned. It's hypothetical, I agree, and hypocritical. But we all know that it will never happen because the bill won't sail through. Mr. Speaker, let us look at international support. Financing of political parties is something for the next government to introduce, and we shall move the legislation. The idea, the EU and the US have sent strong signals that financing of political parties should be regulated by way of legislation. IDA, with whom I had a meeting, is willing to dispense technical support. And of course, I exchanged views with the representative of IDA, and I put across the views of opposition very forcefully, and I take it for granted convincingly. And I said, we are all for legislation to regulate financing of political parties. But it cannot happen on the threshold of a general election and not prior to wide discussion at the bar of public opinion. Mr. Speaker, as an opposition, and soon government to be, we will enter into effective negotiation with all willing parties and the people to regulate financing of political parties. Mr. Speaker, we will make sure that no one is left out, and will be a priority, and together with PACE and Freedom of Information Act, will feature prominently in our program. Let me put things within historical perspective. And at page 6 of presidential address in October 2000, it was stated, government will introduce a public funding of political parties with a view to promoting sound, dynamic, and lively democracy and eliminating the risk of corruption and influencing peddling. The mover of the bill had never any intention to act in good faith. There was no discussion at the bar of public opinion, and there has never been any discussion since 2015. I'm talking of effective discussion. But because they have been too busy harassing, intimidating political opponents and make money, it is, of course, the best government which money can buy. When the bill was moved prior to the general election of 2019, there was unanimous decision taken by all members of the opposition to refer the bill to a select committee. But then the then government turned its back on the offer of the opposition. And it is not Honorable Ganu or MP Abbas who will say otherwise. They were fully supportive. Mahmoud Abbas, a government, Mr. Speaker, which has failed lamentably to wage war on a parallel economy laced with hardcore drugs, has no sense of duty. This bill, as I've stated, is a mere eyewash. The MSM was indifferent to proposal of Professor Sachs and his team. The latter had made pragmatic proposal in 2002. The findings of the 2001-2002 report have to be considered carefully, and I will refer to a document which Lalit published on the funding of political parties on the 16th of January 2002. It highlighted the possible influence of big business on government policy. And it's good to quote what Lalit stated. The relationship between big business and political parties represents one of the major crises of modern liberal democracies. There is ample evidence that in many countries, including Mauritius, there's dubious relationship, to say the least, between big business and mainstream political parties. The relationship between the regime and the big business is big business. Are you surprised that the annex to the budget and finance bill make provision to entertain the setting up of a graphite refinery project in the Freeport? For a few dollars more, the regime can ignite a time bomb. And let me quote an excerpt from an interview given by financial analysts. The MIC has allowed the corporate sector to privatize gain while socializing losses via depreciation of the rupee.
Excuse me, you have a bill here.
Yes, I'm referring to contribution made by private sector.
Yes, but you're referring to political or what economic analysis. Refer to the bill that is in front of you. Go ahead.
I'm talking of profits. I'm talking of profits, right, which was deposited in the war chest of the regime. What is wrong with that?
Okay, I will stop you where you go wrong.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you've acceded to what I've said. The report of the Select Committee on funding of political parties was submitted in October 2004. It was chaired by the then Honorable Leung Sing QC, who was Attorney General. There are 3 of the 9 members who are sitting members of the House today. The MMM since then never deemed it fit to have wide discussion on the relevance of the recommendation. Mr. Speaker, Labour-led government in 2005 gave priority to the Law Reform Commission as proposed by Lord Mackay. In 2013, Labour-led government produced a paper on modernizing of the electoral system. It is unfortunate that the Alliance Labour-MMM was not successful at the election of 2014. Otherwise, electoral reform and financing of political parties would have been addressed. As we say, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. This bill before us is a red herring, an eyewash, another instance of social engineering, away from distracting us from the real issues. There's a cost of living crisis and financial bubble which will turn our credit ratings into a junk status. It's worse than a black comedy rooted in the tragic realities of a decadent regime. An all-out internal conflict is brewing within the rank and file of this government. And it is not the Deputy Speaker or the leader of the ML who will contradict me. They are dagger drawn. Mr. Speaker, the DPM and its 4 militant platform is falling flat on its face. The MSM and its renegades will bend backwards to use the resources from the war chest in a vain attempt to buy votes. People are not duped. Voters will strike back with a vengeance to overthrow the stinking regime at the ballot box. The regime will bite its dirty bullet. The ministers are giving the nation a foretaste of electoral bribery with lavish distribution of goods from dirty money from betting, fixing horse racing, bribery, and corruption. Do we have a gambling regulatory authority which can act?
You're going out of the bill. Talk on the bill, not GRA, whatever you're talking.
But FSC is mentioned in the bill.
No, don't insist. I know what I'm telling you, and you know what I am telling you.
All right. Let me come to crowdfunding. Certainly, it is not crowdfunding which has been raised by the regime. And it is not crowdfunding money which is in the war chest of the MSM. But when we talk of suspicious donation, it has to apply to all political parties. That's why I insist and I make a plea to the Prime Minister to disclose and to tell us whether proceeds which have been deposited into the war chest, whether these are clean and neat proceeds. And I ask, this is a legitimate question. What is good for the Labour Party is equally good for all political parties, and disclosure is mandatory. And up to now, they have failed, and they have failed abysmally to disclose. And we don't know what they have overseas also. Mr. Speaker, the right to stand as a candidate is a constitutional right. Any attempt to amend the Representation of People's Act to further the democratic process will be anti-constitutional. I ask the regime to stay away and not to use the tyranny of numbers to exercise undue pressure. Game for vengeance, harassment, and threat is the political yardstick. But what has been the fate of the main agent of the MSM in constituency number 8? He wanted to talk on manipulation of vote, on vote buying, on corrupt practices, but he was...
I'll stop you. You're talking about electoral practices. We are talking of something else here. Don't discuss, stick to the bill.
All right. You want me to stick to the bill? You don't hear to hear certain truth. Okay.
Stick to the bill.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, the financing of the Labour Party, as I've stated, is public knowledge. But then, people within the rank and file of the Labour Party didn't keep company with the likes of Aglioti, Dr. Sobrino Mehta. And it's important that I say so, because these people are called upon to make hefty contribution to the war chest of the party in power. What are we proposing? The Honourable DPM has said, what are we proposing? We are proposing the setting up of a serious fraud office which will act vigorously and independently and funding of political parties have to be justified. A Labour alliance will introduce the legal framework. It will be a people's legislation, and it will be the subject of wide discussion at the bar of public opinion. Transparency and accountability with no your donors provisions. And as I said, nothing will be imposed. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Mr. Speaker, the House can rest assured. We will be mindful and watchful. The Office of the Electoral Commission and the Supervisory Commission is expected to be more diligent. It has to be given all the means. The constant breakthrough in digital technology has its merits, but the Electoral Commission must not be caught off guard. The Electoral Commissioner has given firm assurances that ID cards and passport will be used to identify voters. And I hope there will be no pressure borne upon the Electoral Supervisory Commission and Commissioner from Government House or le réduit to change course. The Electoral Commission, together with the Electoral Supervisory Commission, the Electoral Commissioner, together with the Electoral Supervisory Commission, are the sole master to steer the electoral process, more so from dissolution of Parliament till the results are produced, pronounced, and electoral returns made. The people will never forgive nor forget that MSM in government from 2014 to 2024 is a blatant mistake, an act of fraudulent practice. It has to go, and the people are calling for a snap election. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, with this bill, la montagne aura accouché d'une souris. In other words, this bill, which is largely repetitive of its 2019 version, is in essence ill-timed and must not be adopted by this House. Thank you very much.